Last week, we went and gathered the stuff to put in the Ecosphere. And this week, we're kind of working on setting up the container and making sure it's ready for all the contents that we went and gathered. For this Ecosphere, we have a piece of driftwood. And one of the projects I'm gonna be working on today is anchoring this driftwood down in the Ecosphere. And I'll kind of explain a little bit more as to why I need to do that. Luckily, this piece of driftwood is sinking on its own, but it can tip over. So we're gonna go ahead and get started on that. One of the first things I did when getting ready to anchor this piece of driftwood in here is I set it inside the container. And then after doing that, I looked from the bottom up into the container and I used a marker to mark where I wanted it to set. This container is a little bit imperfect, so it doesn't sit exactly, it's not exactly flat bottom. So where I put it, it will affect how it kind of just sits in the container overall. So I took a marker and on the bottom I drew a very, now it looks like an ugly outline, but it really helps to remember where it actually went. So I drew that outline on the very bottom of the container. That way if I'm washing stuff on the inside and moving things around, it doesn't scuff it away. And then the next thing I did is I took some of these little zip tie anchors. And these zip tie anchors, people use them for like cables and stuff like that, just to help clean up the look of desks. But what I'm gonna be using is I'm using these anchors to basically zip tie this piece of driftwood to the bottom. And after looking at the piece of driftwood, I kind of decided where would be best, in my opinion, to place these anchors. And I also put those down and then drew some crude squares around that area on the bottom as well. So now that that's done, I'm going to have to clean out the inside glass, but I'll do that in just a moment. These anchors do have some like double-sided tape on them. I don't trust it to stay in the aquatic environment. Even if I had left the tape on there, I probably would have supplemented it with silicone and tried to seal it. But I'm just gonna remove the tape anyways, because I have some aquarium safe silicone, and I think these will do just fine using only that. I'm gonna wait until I actually drill the wood to place these anchors, because I have some bad luck. And I have a feeling that one of these holes I'm gonna try to drill to mount these anchors is probably gonna go wrong. So I'm probably gonna have to move one of these anchors. So I'm not gonna silicone those down until at least I know that everywhere that they're actually gonna be on the piece of wood. The first thing I'm gonna do is, instead of drilling into the driftwood itself right off the bat, I'm gonna drill a test hole in this little piece of wood just to make sure I have the right size so that the zip tie can fit through. That one might be a little snug, but we're gonna try. Now, one thing that I kind of wish I might have tried with this is I'd be curious. I noticed that like I got this to fit just right before we started soaking it. And then I soaked the driftwood. And then when I tried to put it back into the container, it had expanded from the soaking. So one thing I'd be curious about is if you purposely mounted this before soaking it, if then the process of soaking would kind of just further, like, just grab onto whatever means it is you use, especially if you're drilling into it, because the wood, hopefully in theory, will expand and kind of grab onto whatever it is you're placing through it, be it zip ties like I'm going with this method, or if you're running a screw into it. Another thing I had considered was a nylon, basically screw, but I didn't wind up going that route. All right, here's to hoping that this plan actually works. One of the reasons I like this idea rather than using like larger screws is that I figured worst case scenario, if I did mess up these holes or they just didn't work very well, at least they're really low, they're pretty small, and they should be able to be hidden. So yeah, kind of planning for a B or plan B just in case. All right, so you might have noticed I'm wearing a different shirt. Two things have happened. One, it's another day, and two, the camera that was shooting all the detailed shots died. filming. So I'm gonna recap what you didn't see that I finished up yesterday. You saw all the way to the point where I kind of laid out where I wanted to put everything inside of here. Really the only thing that happened after that is I put big blobs of aquarium safe silicone down, tacked the anchors down into those blobs, and gave it some time to dry. I've had a fan going on this overnight. It's really actually been longer than 1 day exactly. And the silicone's all set. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cinch down the zip ties to make them a little more taut. I have one of the locking pieces on the end of the zip ties, and that's gonna be backed right up against the anchor point. And at that point, it should hold on pretty well. I've already kind of tugged on it as is, and it's in there secure. I have no question it's gonna hold in place. Even if I can hold it completely upside down. And if I didn't want to redo my work, I was tempted to do like a Dairy Queen thing where I was gonna pull out, never mind. But yeah, I'm gonna cinch those down. Honestly, the last lock that I put on the end probably is a little overkill. I was trying to tug a little bit of the extra slack out of them, and the part where the zip tie is passing through the silicone, it really, I basically couldn't get it to budge. I'm sure if I really tried and I got a pair of pliers or something, but I don't think that any of the tiny crustaceans in here are really gonna be exerting a lot of force on this. So it's plenty fine. So now I'm just taking a pair of these and clip off the excess zip tie. You could probably just take the entire zip tie without using anchors and just lay it across the bottom and then silicone that entire zip tie in place. So you probably don't even need to buy the anchors, honestly. Yep. There we go. Now the driftwood's in place. So now that it's all in place, we're actually going to start filling it with substrate and stuff. And when I say we, I mean Erica. She's gonna take over from here and she's gonna tell you what we're gonna do and how we're gonna go about putting the substrate and the rest of the stuff in this tank.
Now we're gonna get to the part where we're adding the substrate and then the sand. I'm not adding any plants today simply for the fact that we went to an aquatic fish store and we bought some plants for it. However, the plants had some planaria in the tank, and we wanted to make sure we could treat the plants before adding them to this Ecosphere to make sure that there weren't any planaria. So for this Ecosphere, I actually didn't want the ground to be entirely level. So in some areas I have it a little taller, and just to give it more of a landscape than some of the previous Ecospheres we did. Now, this step you can do, but you don't have to do. So what I'm about to add is a little bit of the substrate or soil that we found on location. And I'm going to actually mix that with a little bit of this dirt and then mix it in. That way we're hoping it'll give a nice food source for the critters in the container. Okay, so my hands are nice and dirty now. Now is the fun stuff. Are we gonna add the dirt or sand, technically?
It's hard to be funny when you're just putting dirt in a jar.
Yeah, like I want to make jokes, but they're all dirty. So now what I'm doing with the moss is I'm going to be pushing it down under the substrate and trying to get it to take a hold, and I'm hoping that it might grow out, but this is terrestrial moss, not actually aquatic moss. So we're gonna see how this works out. It might not actually do too much aside from grow taller in this Ecosphere. Now if this terrestrial moss doesn't take off, what's going to wind up happening is it's going to rot and break down, and that's going to feed all the different detrivores inside this ecosphere as well. So regardless what happens with this moss, there's no downside for us, as long as there's of course not too much ammonia and too much stuff breaking down all at once. So we're not adding all the water today. This is a small portion of the water. We laid some plastic wrap down, just kind of break the force of the water so it doesn't like mess up all the scaping I did with the sand and soil. Anyway, so this has no critters in it. This is just water treated with prime, but we'll be adding the critters slightly later on in our very next video.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I might restart that just so I remember where I'm at. I'm kind of talking to myself, so you don't have to reply. You can if you want to, though.
Okay.
Okay.